What is up, guys, and welcome back into the Rams house. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me to talk about some Rams football. It's so nice to be able to actually talk about a Rams game. No news, no training camp or anything like that. We actually got to see a game today, or yesterday actually, and that was a bunch of fun just to be able to see the Rams go out there and hit the field. I have my takeaways, my players that were really fun to watch, some players that disappointed a little bit, and just my overall takeaways for how this game went. Definitely leave in the comments down below your takeaways for this game, some of the players that impressed you the most, and some players you may be concerned about for the season and how it's going to go as a whole. Thank you guys so much for being patient, for waiting to be able to see this reaction to the game just a day later. Ran out of time. I wanted to do an edited down video version of this as I normally do with my videos, but just did not have the time. So we're going live today to talk about it with you guys, and I can't wait just to have the conversation with you on how this game went in your eyes. I'll just get into it here. Obviously, it was week one. It was exciting to see the Rams just back on the field in general, but it was definitely a very sloppy game when you're talking about both sides of the football. Not really for just the Rams or just the Texans. It just felt like a sloppy game in general, and it felt like there were penalty flags left and right in this game, whether they were thrown and they shouldn't have been, or whether they should have been thrown. There were penalty flags everywhere, and it felt like that was killing a lot of the drives for both sides of them and just getting them behind the sticks, which if you get in that situation for both of these teams in this matchup in particular, those kinds of penalties like holding calls, false starts, they really do end up killing the drive because both these defenses are very talented, as we saw yesterday. The score ended up being 14-9. The Rams ended up winning. And that just tells you a little bit about the talent of both these defenses. So if you have those kinds of penalties, those early seasons mishaps, just on both sides of the ball, they definitely show through because you need to kind of grind and earn for every single yard. And so when you look at the penalties in particular, I actually looked this up. The Rams had 70 or 7 penalties for 60 yards, and the Texans had 11 penalties for 80 yards, which was just crazy. That ends up coming out to be 18 penalties in total. So it was definitely a sloppy game, and both defenses had their say and they had their way in the day today. Not a lot of scoring ended up happening. And you could just kind of see, especially for a team like the Rams offense, who doesn't play any of their starters in preseason. And Matthew Stafford just got back into practice just a few weeks ago. AJ Jackson in practice just a few weeks ago. You could see that this offense was definitely sloppy and they were getting things going. But on top of that, you're facing such a good defense, in my opinion, a top 5 defense in the NFL in the Houston Texans. So definitely a rusty start for the offense. Not a lot of points were scored, but also you got to take into account the opponent that they were playing. Very good pass rush. They actually impressed me. The Texans did for the run defense that they had as well. They were able to really bottle up Kyron Williams. We never really got the run game going, and then it just forced it all to be on Matthew Stafford in this pass game against a really good pass rush. And so you definitely didn't see an offense that was clicking, but you did see one that, like, as the game went on, is kind of what I expected. We began to figure out a little bit more things and be able to get things worked out a little bit more and score some points. I was really impressed with our defense as a whole. I think just when you make a team not even score a touchdown in the opening game of the season, that is very impressive. Now, the Texans were dealing with a lot of things along the offensive line with as far as injuries go, and just some different things that they were working through with the new offensive coordinator, some new weapons alongside Nico Collins. But I was really impressed to hold a team under double digits, to not let them get into the end zone one time. That was a very impressive statement by this Rams defense. You saw the pass rush getting after it. The cornerbacks, I'm sure, impressed a lot of people who were really down on this Rams cornerback room. And so I was really impressed overall with what the defense did, but you also have to have kind of a caveat too and just understand the offensive line issues that the Texans were working through as well probably hampered a lot of the things that they wanted to do. I was super impressed, though, with the Rams' run defense in particular, because this is obviously a sore spot that we had going from last season, and it was a big question to have to answer. We're going to see how it gets answered the rest of the season against other opponents. But early on, this Rams run defense was getting after it, especially with Nate Landman being added to the group. You could feel his presence. He was all over the field on Sunday. Obviously, had the big punch out to save the game, which was huge. But even before that, you see him flying around. You see him diagnosing runs, getting there. And it felt like there were always all the hats to the football early on in this game, and it continued throughout. You only saw a couple big runs by the Texans, but big runs were only like 10 yards, and there were only a few of those. only a handful. If you actually look at the stats for the Texans in the run game, they actually did not do all that great. CJ Stroud scrambled for 32 yards, but that's not really the run game. If you look at Nick Chubb, he had 13 carries for 60 yards. Agumbawale had 2 carries for 9 yards, and then Pierce 3 carries for 5 yards. So this Rams defense as a whole kept the Texans under 70 rushing yards, which is very impressive for this group, but that had big questions against, how they're going to defend the run. And I really think you saw Nate Landman come in there and help things out there, as well as the defensive front working in tandem. So I was very impressed with that. So just getting into some of the comparisons here, as we're talking about the game, we're going to be talking about the stat overview and the comparison between these two teams, because I think it just shows how interesting this game was. So on third down, the Texans were 2 for 9, which was really impressive by this Rams defense to hold a team to 2 conversions on 9 attempts. That is very impressive. We were 7 for 13. But the similarities between both these teams in terms of the offensive output was very interesting. If you look at it, we had the same amount of first downs as the Texans. We both had 18. We both ran 57 plays exactly. Both had 9 drives, so very similar. Passing, we did pass them a little bit better than they did as far as passing yards go. We had 296 to their 265. We both took 3 sacks. We ran 25 times, and the Texans ran 27 times. And obviously the penalties, as I talked about earlier, they were everywhere in this game. 7 for 60 yards, Texans 11 for 80 yards. Time of possession, we had 31 minutes, and the Texans had 28. So if you look across all those different stats and just between both the teams, really the big separator between this was the Rams being better on third down, 7 for 13 conversions to the Texans, 2 for 9. But also we ended up having those 2 turnovers, which were huge. The one by Kobe Durant, I still don't know how he had that interception. To be able to jump up there and take the ball out of, I think it was Hutchinson's hands, that was such an impressive interception, probably the most impressive of his career. And then obviously the Nate Landman big punch out in the end of the game to kind of seal it. So those were the 2 big things, in my opinion, between both offenses, that what separated us because of how similar it was ended up being the turnovers, and it ended up being the third down efficiency rate, which came to the Rams' favor, fortunately for us. I'm going to get into this comment here real quick before we move on. We got Silly Fungi. Thanks for tuning in, Silly. He says Puka and Landman with the flex emojis. Those guys were impressive, and that's actually a great segue. Thank you, Silly Fungi, for the comment. To some of the players of the games, players that stood out for me, definitely let me know yours in the comments down below. But as for me, some standout players for the Rams, I'm going to start out with the obvious, Nate Landman. And this was just impressive to see as a Rams fan. And obviously, since we lost Ernest Jones, that has been kind of a weak spot for the LA Rams, is that linebacker position, both via the run and via the pass. Spates did step up last year, but that was a weakness for us. But Nate Landman, obviously, he had the big punch out to win the game, and that was impressive. Just as impressive was Braden Fisk's recovery that he had. That was just crazy to see. But Nate Landman, he was all over the field all game long. And if you weren't paying attention to him, you at least saw your eye on him because he was all over the place. He was diagnosing the runs. He was getting in there before they got down the field. He was hitting the right gaps. Obviously, had the punch out. He was good in pass coverage. Nate Landman was a huge standout player and the number 1 standout player, in my opinion. Obviously, I think the game-sealing play did help to influence that, but if you really watch him throughout the game, he was all over the place, vocal leader, team captain, making tackles, and he really was one of the biggest keys to stopping the run game, which is obviously very important when the Texans are trying to counter a pass rush with running the football. Next up, Matthew Stafford. While you look at his stats and they don't look uber impressive like MVP caliber numbers, he actually had a crazy good day, especially coming back to practice only 3 weeks ago. He was 21 for 29, 245 yards, and a touchdown to no interceptions. And the stat sheet really doesn't show how impressive of a day Matthew Stafford did have. He had a bunch of impressive throws, a couple no-look throws. If you guys are on Twitter or X, you've seen those no-look throws. And he just took his shots when he needed to. I would think the situation around him wasn't great as far as the pass rush and the offensive line goes. The offensive line did struggle against this Texans pass rush, and hats off to the Texans, but we also had some injuries up front there. So Stafford, actually played really well considering the circumstances and considering him getting into training camp so late, really close to our first game was when he was getting worked back in. And he just played like an absolute beast out there. He did really good, made all the right decisions, had great aggressive throws. Obviously, took a couple sacks, but very impressed with what Matthew Stafford did. I'm curious to see what you guys think of his performance overall as well. But the next guy, number 3, as a standout for the Rams, Puka Nacua. Like I told you guys heading into this game and into this season, my bold take is Devontae Adams is going to outstat, if you will, Puka Nacua across. When this season is done, you're going to look back and see that Devontae has more stats than Puka. That could still be the case, and they're still getting warmed up in their chemistry between Devontae and Matthew Stafford, I believe. But Puka just reminded me of just how consistent of a football player he is. He had 10 receptions on 100 or for 130 yards. Was very impressive. It felt like anytime the Rams needed a big play, anytime it was third down, it was third and Puka. They were going his way, and he was always so open. Like especially on those dig routes, he was always so open. Obviously, gets the yards after catch, gets the game-winning play there when he went into the C gap, and then got the catch for the first down. Nothing bad to say about Puka Nacua. He had a big game for the Rams, and I honestly don't know if they win it without Puka Nacua, especially with Devontae Adams and Matthew Stafford still kind of developing that rapport a little bit. At number 4, a standout player for me, Byron Young. He actually had a really good game, and when you look at the numbers, obviously he doesn't have a ton of sacks. He only had the 1 sack, but if you just watch the game and you're a fan of the game and you watch Byron Young, he was really popping off. He had a bunch of pressures on there on CJ Stroud, got the first sack of the Rams season, which was great to see very early on. But also something I was really noticing about Byron Young, and this isn't a strength of his, which is what was so cool about it, was his run defense. He was making sure to set the edge and keep gap integrity, wasn't overcommitting. And they even used him as a QB spy a couple times, which I actually liked considering the speed that he has. So Byron Young was a big standout player for me. You could just feel his impact. And a lot of the stuff that doesn't go on the stat sheet was felt, especially via the run defense. So very happy to see Byron Young in what I believe is his contract year, or this might be, let's see, it's 2025. We may have one more year of Byron Young after this. But anyway, he's getting close to the end of his contract. That was a very impressive week 1 performance by him, and I can't wait to see what he does here. Before I get into my next standout player, we're going to go back into the comments here. Thank you so much for this comment. He says, did you hear from Nico Collins yesterday? That's because Witherspoon shut him down. That's right. The secondary played so well. If you look at Nico Collins' numbers and really the Texans wide receiver numbers as a whole, let's see, Nico Collins had 3 catches for 25 yards. That is so impressive. And their leading receiver was the rookie Jaden Higgins, 2 catches for 32 yards. Rams secondary balled out that game. They're definitely a big standout. So thanks for the comment there. He says the only way to stop Puka is the refs. That's no doubt about that. So getting back into the standout players here, Kobe Durant was the other big standout player for me. I think this is one of those guys that I was pegging as a big guy to watch coming into this year to develop. He's really shown a lot of development, but this is his contract year with the Rams, and it's a great opportunity for him to stand out and to be able to make his name known, just because this cornerback room is a little bit in flux and there's a bunch of opportunities for anybody to make a name for themselves. I still don't know how Kobe Durant made that interception on Xavier Hutchinson. That was just crazy to be able to go up there and grab the football out of his hands. It was a great throw by Stroud, but Kobe Durant made the better play. So you love to see the land shark. He was all over the place. Love his energy, and he's going to be a key player to watch as this year goes on, just knowing it's his contract year, and the Rams are going to be addressing that cornerback room at the end of the year, seeing how they did. I think Kobe Durant could be a guy to make a name for himself for an extension if he keeps this up. Another standout here, just a quick play that he made, Josiah Stewart, obviously the rookie out of Michigan. I did not expect to see him as much as we did, but he was going in there on some different sub packages or to give relief to either Byron Young or Jared Verse. And he made a key and critical pass breakup there on CJ Stroud that ended up ending their drive. And so it was really cool to see Josiah Stewart get out there early, make an impact. Seeing number 10 on an edge rusher is definitely something to get used to. But he definitely made his impact in the reps he got, and it was impressive to see him get out there and kind of that Michael Hoyt role a little bit, even though, he didn't play as many snaps as Hoyt did last year. Jordan Whittington was another guy that stood out to me. I know there's a lot of guys that stood out. We got some guys who also had some bad games too, which we'll get into. But Jordan Whittington overall, He just looks like he is a Rams receiver, and we saw this last year, but it just looks exactly like the kind of receiver that the Rams can rely on and depend upon. And he's exactly the style of receiver that the Rams like to see. And when we saw Puka Nacua leave the game to get a little bit taped up on his face and to get evaluated for a concussion, that was a great opportunity for Jordan Whittington to get in there because he compares very similarly, in my opinion, the most similarly to Puka Nacua in this offense. So it felt very seamless when Puka went out there to get those snaps for Jordan Whittington. He had a crazy big return. It was like 70 plus yards that was taken back because of a holding call, according to the refs, which was very frustrating. And then he had another big catch and run. It was probably close to 30 plus yards there. That was called back because of another penalty by the refs. And that was kind of the key of the game. And a big story of the game was how much the refs were kind of calling things back, whether it was right or wrong. We saw a lot of big plays get called back, but Jordan Whittington, nonetheless, filled in well for Puka when he was out, had a big kick return. I think we're going to see that more. It's going to be very risky kicking it to Jordan Whittington because he showed even last year the skill that he had in the return game. So Jordan Whittington was up there as well. Got to mention Xavier Smith. So happy for him just to see the development that he's had over the last few years and just seeing how far he's come from a raw kind of gadget guy used only for kick and punt returns to now being a legitimate factor in this offense. He had that 51. Actually, I don't know if that's right. Let me double check that. 51 yards doesn't seem quite like what the reception he had along the sideline. I think it was a little bit shorter than that. Let me just double check for you. Yeah, he had 36 yards. Okay, so he had one catch for 36 yards, Xavier Smith did. And that was a big play to get us into field goal range there and to continue to adding on to that drive. Beautiful throw by Matthew Stafford. It's just cool to see a guy who, again, was raw, who we've kept behind the scenes on the practice squad, who has really only been a punt returner to this point, just continue to get reps and now is on the starting offense, getting inserted there on certain packages. That big 31-yard catch did set up a good drive for the Rams. So very happy for Xavier Smith. Last guy that stood out to me just briefly was the linebacker Sean Dolak. This is a guy that maybe not everybody would pick up on, but his impact on special teams was felt. It just felt like on either the punt returns by the Texans or the kick returns, Dolak was always the first guy there making an aggressive hit. He's got the energy, always just seems to be around the football when his opportunities are there. So big day for Sean Dolak. So let me know again your comments on who you think stood out for the Rams as far as the players go yesterday. We will get into some of the players that had a rough day in the units in general. But first, let me take a look at some of your comments. Thank you guys so much again for coming in here. Definitely leave your comments down below. So we got Silly Phone Guy says, I want an Agent Zero Midnight Blue jersey so bad. That would actually be so cool. I love that jersey. It's only continued to grow on me. And Byron Young, with that zero, you can't go wrong. I think you should definitely do it. We got another one saying, I'm thinking Landman or Evans as my Midnight Blue. I think either of those is a really good pick for you. Landman obviously is probably going to be a guy who gets a lot of jerseys purchased, a lot more than what Rams fans would expect. His impact was certainly felt yesterday. Another one saying, I got triggered when I heard Troy Reader negate Jay Witt's return. We dropped Pooh Paul for him. Yeah, that was very frustrating. And as soon as that happened, as soon as that I saw the flag on the ground and he get called back after that big return, I was like, dang, that's frustrating. When you see his Troy Reader, I was like, oh gosh, I bet the Rams fan base is all going to be so mad at him. Thank you, Rubio LA Sports 33, for commenting here. He says, defense looks a lot better. 0 touchdowns. Offense just warming up. Horns up. I definitely agree with that. It feels like this defense is already in close to, if not already at, like a championship caliber defense, just considering who we are playing. Again, I think you have to take into account what the Texans were going through with, again, a new coordinator, CJ Stroud behind a very shaky offensive line who did get beat up, and some new wide receivers. But still, I think that this unit is going to continue to do what it did against the Texans and just get better as the year goes on, as we saw last year, and definitely not one to bet against. And I think this Rams offense, a lot of people are overreacting about, this offense isn't going to return to form. This offense is going to be just like it was last year. We're going to have to rely on the defense all year. I disagree with that. I think the Texans are just a very good matchup for us. Again, a lot of big plays did get called back because of penalties. And at the end of the day, the Rams don't play in preseason, play their starters, that is. And so they usually do tend to start out a little bit slower. So I think the offense is only going to get better. I would have thought Tay could What? Let's see. I would have thought Tay could the pass, not Smith. You can trust any formation. Oh, I think you meant to say I think Tay would have caught the pass. Yeah, I think that's a good point there. That's just the cool thing about this Rams roster, though. They do have a lot of depth to the fact that even Xavier Smith, a guy who's a little bit deeper in the roster, can make a big play and kind of turn the tide for the Rams. V8 Midnight Blue, that would be so sick. Oh, no, you're good. Yeah, he said cut the pass. Thank you guys so much for your comments. We're going to keep moving along here with the show. Some players who had a rough day, in my opinion, definitely put in the comments who you think as well. We're going to start with Colby Parkinson and Tyler Higbee. More so, Colby Parkinson was a player who had a rough day. Even if he didn't have a fumble, he did actually get a handful of snaps for the Rams. I got to check these numbers for the Rams because he got a decent amount of snaps. We didn't see Terrence Ferguson at all, which was kind of surprising for the Rams. But, Colby Parkinson got in there, did have a very disappointing first year with the Rams after signing a contract. You obviously think about that fumble that he had late in the game on a drive that could have put away the game at 21-9. He fumbles there. That was obviously a bad play. But I can't seem to find the snap counts for Colby Parkinson and the tight ends here. I thought JB Long posted it, but I can't find it. So forgive me there, but he did have a big amount of snaps. And obviously that fumble play wasn't great. It's just, in my opinion, I look at Colby Parkinson and I see him as a blocking tight end. He had a lot of upside coming out of the draft of being a blocking tight end hybrid with some good wide receiver kind of upside for the tight end position. But he's really disappointed. And I just feel like he doesn't bring that much athleticism to the position. His biggest thing is blocking, and I don't think he should be able to get that many snaps if he's just not showing out after a second year, getting a decent contract for the Rams. So Colby Parkinson definitely had a rough day. I also think Tyler Higbee, to an extent, maybe he wasn't part of the game plan. Maybe the Texans just took him away. I don't know, but he didn't even log a single thing on the stat sheet. So I think Tyler Higbee's impact was more so probably felt in the blocking game. But yeah, obviously Colby Parkinson just had a very rough day, especially at the end there. Another guy who had a rough day, just in general, in terms of the depth chart and the position on this roster, is definitely Darius Williams. This is a guy who we paid some pretty good money to bring back to the Rams last year. All of us were excited about. He's going to be cornerback one. He'd be our lead guy out there. And I heard he had a very rough training camp, did Darius Williams. And yesterday, he didn't even log a single snap for the Rams, which was impressive, just given the fact that the Rams cornerback room isn't like the most elite in the NFL. The fact that he's cornerback four on this roster, he's getting paid the most. I think it gives me an appreciation for the Rams organization in general, just because they don't let a contract dictate who gets playing, like snaps and the snap count and all of that. We saw that even with Joe Noteboom. But yeah, Darius Williams not getting any snaps out there definitely says a lot about where he may be at this point of his career. Obviously, he's a veteran now. I think he's 31 years old. Let me double check that. He's 32. So Darius Williams is cornerback 4 at 32 with the highest paid contract on the Rams in the cornerback room. But we definitely did see a big performance from Mikella Witherspoon, Kobe Durant, and as well as just the entire secondary in general. Emmanuel Forbes had a big day there too. But yeah, definitely Darius Williams is a guy who had a rough day just because he didn't even get a single snap. And is that matchup dependent? Maybe it'll change next week. I don't know. But that's definitely not a great sign for Darius Williams. Another guy who I definitely didn't think would be on the list of players who had a rough day definitely was Quentin Lake, just because of some of the key penalties that he gave up there. Some defensive holdings, even when we had him on a second or third and long, a defensive holding obviously is an automatic first down for the Texans offense. And Quentin Lake, he still had a bunch of big plays in there. But if I had to pick out another player who had a bit of a rough day, it was Quentin Lake, just because he gave up some, automatic first downs to an offense that we really held in check a lot of the game. I don't think we're going to see Quentin Lake enter onto the players who had a rough day again this season. He's a very consistent, solid player for the Rams, definitely underrated. But yesterday wasn't his best day, just in terms of looking at those flags and some of those key things that he gave up there on key downs. I think also when you look at some position, like a position group that did struggle, players who had a rough day, was the interior of our offensive line in particular. Like the entire offensive line had a big task going into this game when it came against a crazy good pass rush, especially with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. That, we expected, but the interior of our offensive line did struggle a lot more than I thought. Hats off to the Texans defense. They stopped the run really well, but also just a lot of pressure coming from that interior of our offensive line. And some of that was the injuries and the shakeups. We did see Steve Avila go out of the game early, and we did see Kevin Dawson leave the game. So there was some shaking up going on in the interior, but it never really felt like I was at a point personally where I was comfortable with Stafford dropping back, taking a deep pass, or, the run game really taking off. Hats off again to the Texans, but our offensive line, especially in the interior, probably a little bit because of the shakeup due to the injury, definitely did struggle a little bit. And lastly, for a player who had a rough day, this is very subjective, and I wouldn't even say he had a rough day. Just in terms of what we were expecting, you could technically put Devontae Adams on players who had a rough day, but I don't even fully want to go there. I think it's just personally my expectations to the kind of game that he had and seeing what ended up happening stats wise. I think his impact was more than what the stats were willing to show. He had 4 catches for 51 yards. What surprised me most about Devontae Adams yesterday was the fact I think he had 3 different drops on 3 separate occasions. And I think that's going to be cleaned up. I think that's just a one game kind of thing. He's still getting used to this offense. I think he has the offense down perfectly, but I think the chemistry between Stafford is still being built up, especially considering the fact Stafford basically missed the entire Rams training camp. So I don't even really want to put Devontae Adams on this list. I think just some fans, including myself, expected him just to explode yesterday. And he didn't quite do that, but I'm not concerned about it. I'm not thinking this is like an Allen Robinson signing kind of thing. I think just where my expectations were at yesterday probably just didn't meet what ended up going on. But again, he provided a lot more than what the stat sheet was willing to show. He was even open on a lot of the plays that the ball just didn't come to him, whether it be pressure or whether it be Matthew Stafford looking somebody else's way. So I wouldn't be concerned about Devontae Adams. It's just if I had to put one more on there, considering my expectations, it didn't quite meet what I expected. But, he still had a really good debut for the Rams, in my opinion. So that is the standouts and some of the players who had a rough day and just general how the game went. I think the Rams team as a whole and their offense in particular is only going to get better as the season goes along. Again, this is first game of the season. You're rusty. You had Stafford who missed most of the camp. You have a lot of different pieces moving around on the offensive line with injuries early on. You have a really good defense that you're playing against. I think that you just have to expect the offense not to just mega produce, just considering all that happening. I really do think this offense is going to return to form of something similar to that 2021 Rams offense. And we're going to begin lighting up the score sheet. And the offense is going to begin to take off as the year goes on. I think early on is when we're going to see the most struggles, which reflects what we saw yesterday. And again, hats off to the Texans defense. They did very impressive to me. I definitely thought that we'd at least be able to run the ball a little bit better to offset that pass rush. And credit to McVay, he stuck to it. He did end up running it for, let's see. Let me just take a look at the stat sheet real quick. McVay did stick to the running game, and I was impressed with it, especially considering it wasn't working for a long period of time. So he had Kyren Williams run 18 times for 66 yards, a touchdown. Blake Corum got a carry. Puka Nacua got a carry. Jordan Whittington got a carry. So he did stick to the running game, even though it wasn't working crazy good. But yeah, those are my overall expectations for this season. I think the offense is just going to continue to get better, and I think the defense will as well, which is impressive considering the kind of performance we had yesterday. But I want to get back into the comments here now. You guys kind of can control the way the rest of the show goes. Those are my thoughts on the game. Let's see what he says here. Puka and Devontae combo is going to be fun this season. I definitely agree with that. These guys are just scratching the surface to what they can be doing together. Obviously, Puka already in midseason form. I think the more reps that Devontae Adams is going to get in this offense with Matthew Stafford against a little bit of an easier defense, I think this combo is going to be one of the best in the league for sure. Troy Reader and Higbee, only bad plays and both got penalties. Yeah, those were definitely some players who struggled yesterday for sure. Lake didn't have a horrible game, but made some bad decisions. I definitely agree. And I don't want to be too hard on Quentin Lake there. I definitely think he had a lot of great plays like you were mentioning, but definitely some not boneheaded decisions, but just some mess ups in big moments. And again, I don't expect to see Quentin Lake on the players who had a rough day kind of category the rest of the season. Dark Horse Hunter and Fergalicious, they didn't suit up. Yeah, that was kind of impressive. Like I didn't think that was going to happen. Jarquez Hunter kind of made sense a little bit to me, just being that the running backs we have. I don't know if he would have even gotten on the field. Terrence Ferguson was a bit of a surprise to me as far as him not really getting in the game there. But at the same time, when I think about it, he did miss some time in camp due to an injury. So maybe Davis Allen did elevate ahead of him in that time period. Just for now, I think Ferguson's going to be more of a long play guy for the Rams rather than immediate impact right now. But we'll see if he gets involved. Maybe it's a matchup thing. Who knows? Does anyone know when Fergie Ferg is going to be ready? Yeah, I was kind of just talking about this. I think it depends on what you mean by ready. But as far as play time goes, I think we are going to see him in different kinds of packages inserted early on. I think his role is only going to build as the year goes on, especially when you have Colby Parkinson kind of struggling a little bit. But I think he was behind the eight ball a little bit just because of the injury that he suffered in camp and just missing some time. And being a rookie in general in a tight end room that is actually pretty deep with some decent talent there, I don't think he's going to overtake Tyler Higbee for this season at any point. If it does come to that, I feel like it'll be the end of the year. But I think as a tight end two, big slot kind of guy, I think he'll get worked in as the year goes on. Hope Kevin Dotson will be good for next week. I definitely agree because I think Kevin Dotson is our best offensive lineman that we have. Definitely best interior guy that we have. And it was kind of interesting to see him go out like that with the injury because he's actually one of our tougher guys who really rarely misses any time. So I hope he's good as well. Texans D is really good, though. It was good early test for Eagles. Maybe Carter will have a suspension for that game. Yeah, that was definitely a very good test. Texans defense, I really do believe, is going to be up there for the best in the league by the end of the year. And again, Rams offense, I expect them to start out slower just given the fact that we don't play in preseason and given the fact that Stafford missed a lot of time. And again, defense is really good that we played up against, so I only expect it to get better as the year goes on. Back-to-back early games coming up, Tennessee and Philly. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I'm still surprised that Philly game is an early window game considering how good it was last year in the playoffs and the storylines behind that. He says take Rams -4, -4.5. Yeah, against the Titans. That's going to be a really fun one to preview just because they're a young team and they have a lot of talent on their roster, a lot of young talent. I think my biggest concern for this Texans game coming up will probably, or the Titans game, my bad. I meant to say Titans. This Titans game coming up, my biggest concern, I think, is going to be the defense that we're going to be facing. In particular, the defensive guys in the middle on the defensive line for the Titans definitely do scare me with Jeffrey Simmons and T'Vondre Sweat against our offensive line, especially the way it looked this week. And if we have any injuries, I think that would be one of the biggest things I would be concerned about heading into the game next week. But I do think the Rams should be able to take a win. Rubio LA Sports 33 says, I've been subscribed for a while now, but this is my first time in the chat. Horns up. I appreciate the subscription, man. I really do. Thank you for being subscribed and keeping up with me and talking Rams. It's always a good time. We could rest Dotson if needed. If need be versus the Titans. I kind of agree with that. I think if the injury is serious enough, I think it'd be smart to rest Dotson, give him time. But at the same time, as I was just talking about, the interior defensive line for the Titans is actually very impressive when you look at it with T'Vondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons. I don't have to tell you guys about how good Jeffrey Simmons is. If you think back to that Super Bowl year against the Titans, somewhere it was like week 9 or something like that, he was just completely wrecking our gameplay and just everything we wanted to do. Great run stopper, great pass rusher, especially against kind of more athletic, agile kind of linemen. So hopefully we're healthy enough for that game because I think that's going to be a huge key for the game coming up against the Titans. Let's see. Rubio LA Sport 33 says our game and the Seattle San Francisco low scoring defensive games. Yeah, for sure. That was definitely interesting to see. I think I expected that a little bit more for our game and just the matchup that we had to see a low scoring affair. But Seattle and San Francisco, that was definitely a very ugly score. Were you guys happy that the 49ers won, or were you hoping the Seahawks won? Because that one, it's always hard to pick between divisional teams of who you'd want to win when they're squaring off against each other. But for me, I think San Francisco may be a bigger threat down the stretch for the Rams just because they're easy schedule. So I was kind of hoping Seattle was going to win. But at the end of the day, a divisional opponent lost, so that's always a good thing. I see the Rams winning big next week. What do you think the score prediction is going to be for you? I know it's early. Obviously, we don't understand the injury report yet, and we have a little bit of time to go. But what would you say the score prediction would be? I loathe the whiners. Yeah, I think if I were to pick a team in the NFL, it would easily be the 49ers to be my least favorite team, most hated team in the NFL, especially during that stretch, uh, kind of early on in the Stafford era, but even a little bit before that, where they won like 10 games in a row against us. And the attitude of that team, the personality, just not a fan of the 49ers. They're probably my least favorite team in the NFL as well. So I agree with you. Oh wow, he says 33-10 Rams this week. That would actually be so fun to watch. Again, I think the biggest concern for me if I were to pick one against the Titans this week would definitely be that interior defensive line. I think that would be the biggest thing to throw a wrench in our plan, but getting Cam Ward early on here for this young defense who really showed up against the Texans. I'm excited to see what they can do against a rookie quarterback, young quarterback who I kind of felt bad for him. I watched after the Rams game ended, I watched him play against the Denver Broncos. He was throwing some crazy throws, fitting it into tight windows and crazy arm angles, fitting it into spots I didn't even think were possible. And whether it be Calvin Ridley or Chiga Okonkwo, they were just dropping it left and right. So I don't think Cam Ward's going to be a slouch for us to face next week. Definitely, I don't think so. But I think it's opportunistic that the Rams are going to be playing him so early on in his career, week 2. It's crazy how to go against the Broncos defense and then face our defense early on. So definitely like where we get him. I don't know if I have a score prediction in my head right now, but definitely when that video edited version of my prediction next week comes out, I can have a prediction there. He says right now he thinks the Rams are going to win 24-6 against the Titans. I would love that, honestly. Would love that. Well, let's see the injury report. Yeah, that's going to be the biggest thing. I think usually Mondays are the days that McVay addresses the media after a game and kind of gives the injury breakdown and what to expect for this week. But as far as I've seen, there hasn't been any press conferences yet for Sean McVay and this Rams team. So, we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. But if you guys have any other comments and questions, I'm free again. I'm going to be getting off here kind of soon because I want to watch this Bears game with my dad. He's a big Bears fan. So if you got any more questions, any more comments, definitely feel free to leave them below. But, if you got nothing else, definitely be free to end the show now as well. But again, just looking briefly at an overview for this game that we saw yesterday, I don't want people to overreact for the offense, just considering the defense that we were playing. I don't want them to think that Devontae Adams was a bad addition to the team because of the, low amount of stats he put up. I don't really want you to come away from this game thinking it was a bad win because it was only 14-9. Any win in the NFL, it's not like college football. Any win in the NFL counts as the same, whether you win by 30, whether you win by 2 points. So the fact we were able to, have a rusty game, have a game against a really good team, a big AFC kind of contender team, and be able to come out with the win, no matter what the score is, that's always a big win for any team. And I'm glad we started out the season 1-0 rather than starting out 0-1, especially seeing the schedule as the year goes on. Defense, very, very excited to see how it continues to progress because, again, they feel like they're in midseason form after 1 week. Again, you take into account what the Texans were dealing with up front on their offensive line as well as just some of the new changes on the offense, obviously. But I'm still impressed with what the Rams defense did and how good they looked early on. And we're just going to see how the season ends up going. I think this team has a legitimate shot to make a Super Bowl run. But I think if you were to ask me right now, if the Rams were to play the Super Bowl tomorrow against a Bills team, a Ravens team, anything like that, obviously the matchup, the numbers game changes depending on who you're playing. But if you told me they were going to play the Super Bowl tomorrow against a Ravens, a Bills, any of those top teams in the AFC that we saw yesterday, I don't know how confident I'd feel that they would win. I don't know how well they'd match up against them right now. But the good thing is you don't have to play a Super Bowl in September. This time is the time to work things out, and to work things out, getting a win is always a good thing like the Rams did yesterday. I think the team is going to get stronger, and we're going to look more like a Super Bowl contending team as the year goes on. Being honest right now, I would say we're a good playoff team, but it doesn't look like a Super Bowl team after 1 week, just 1 week. But we have the rest of the season to get better, to address these things, to shake off the rust. And I'm confident that they're going to shake off the rust. And so I don't know if you guys agree with me on that account, but those are just kind of my thoughts on it. And definitely just glad we were able to escape there with the win. Very close game. Nate Landman, what a pickup. I mean, for that to be your first game with the LA Rams to make a statement at home, game-winning drive, punching the ball out like he was doing all camp. You gotta love Nate Landman, and again, the defense that he was showing, the reaction time, the recognition of the run concepts that he was showing all game. He was always around the football, laying big hits, had big energy. I definitely think that Nate Landman is going to be the best Rams linebacker that they have had since Ernest Jones left, and could even potentially surpass what Ernest Jones did for us in his short time. Of course, he had to go to Seattle, right? That was frustrating, just like Poop Hall. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts. That will be it, unless you have any last minute questions. I'll give you guys a little bit of time. Otherwise, that'll be it, and I'll be hopping off. But thank you to everybody who has been just spending this night with me, talking some Rams. We got one more comment here. Remember, this was an in-season, preseason game for the majority of the starters on both sides of the ball. I agree with that. This was definitely a game, especially with the Rams resting starters in the preseason and just the way that they do things. I was expecting a slower start on the offensive side of the ball. And again, you go back to it. I sound like a broken record, but Stafford missing the time in camp, Devontae Adams not getting that chemistry built up with him, injuries on our offensive line, facing a really good defense. You're definitely right. It definitely was like an in-season, preseason game, but luckily we ended up escaping with the win, which is a big thing. Deuce Falco, thank you so much for coming into the stream today. He says, Nate Landman. Yeah, what a pickup by the Rams. I don't know if I was alone in this. When the Rams picked him up so early on in the offseason, I definitely thought, hey, this is a guy who's going to compete. Maybe he'll be a good depth piece. We'll see if he can maybe, fight his way to earn a roster spot. I did not expect him to have the kind of impact that he had until really weeks leading up to this game. He's really balled out in camp. He's been a big name for the Rams, obviously became a captain. So what an underrated signing by the Rams. They got him for so cheap too. If we look at that contract for Nate Landman, I think it was 1 year. Let me take a look here. Yeah, 1 year, 1.1 million for Nate Landman. I think he's just only going to get better as the season goes on. And the floor that he has right now is a very high floor, and I'm very excited to see how it progresses. Going to be interested to see if this season goes the way I think it does for Nate Landman, and the impact that he has just continues to get bigger and bigger as the season goes on, continues to have big plays. I would be interested to see if the Rams end up extending him, because I don't know if you guys remember, Ernest Jones was actually getting very close to a contract extension with the Rams before they ended up trading him away. They were very excited to do so. They liked his upside. Something went wrong in there. I don't know what happened, but something went wrong, and they ended up trading him away. But they were close to signing him to a contract extension. And I think that, I don't know if it came down to personality. I don't know if it came down to injuries that, Ernest Jones was going through, or whatever the case may be. I don't know what it is. I think Nate Landman actually has a chance to break the Rams linebacker history that they show of not bringing them back and not valuing it. If his season continues to go the way that I think it's going to go, I think he may get an extension for the Rams, which would be really exciting, because he's only 26 years old, which is crazy. Rubio LA Sports 33 says the secondary kept Nico Collins quiet too. Yeah, I was very impressed with this Rams secondary, and I think it's one that people still around the NFL are not really familiar with. And when they look at it, when their team's going to play the Rams, they're probably going to be like, oh, this is going to be easy. We're going to have a bunch of yards via the passing game. But I love this Rams group, and I think the pass rush that we have paired with the guys that we have right now is really good. I think if you're counting on these cornerbacks, Kobe Durant, Akella Witherspoon, Emmanuel Forbes Jr., to be able to cover for 5-6 seconds with, kind of a worse pass rush than what we have, I don't know how the secondary would look. That's hard for any secondary to do. But pairing the fact with these guys who are hungry, who are not, on big time contracts, these guys who are fighting for, a big contract to make a difference, and who have been kind of homegrown around on this Rams team for the most part, it is very cool to see them making the kind of impact that they are, just because, again, not many people talk about this Rams secondary. So it's really cool to see that the plays that they were able to make, that Cam Kinchin's interception that he almost had, that was crazy. It almost looked very similar to what Kobe Durant had. So upside of the secondary is really good. Nico Collins, I was hearing it all week. People were saying he's going to go over 100 yards, 5 touchdowns, whatever, because people just didn't believe in our secondary. But I really think the pairing of Chris Shula, our defensive pass rush in the front that we have with the secondary we have right now, that works, especially with the system and the defense that we have in place. I think it really complements their skill set. So, yeah, secondary definitely did a really good job with Nico Collins. So I'll give you guys one last call. If you guys have, any more questions, any more comments, definitely leave it down below. Otherwise, I'll be getting out of here. Rubio LA Sports 33 says the D line, linebackers, and secondary look like they're having fun and that they trust each other. And that's the big thing. Trust, communication, having fun, no animosity between a group helps them all just to kind of work as one and not to be me focused. And obviously, we not me culture is huge for the Rams. So I definitely agree. I think the Rams are very set at every single kind of position on the defense, every single level. The cool thing is with this Rams team, we do have 2 first-round picks here from the Atlanta Falcons, as well as another first-round pick the year after that. We have draft capital that should we need to upgrade at any position on this team, but even on the defensive side, imagine if we added another piece, that would be crazy. If we needed to do so, we have the draft capital to do it. But if we don't, I'm sure this defense is going to be fine as well. And then you have great assets at the end of the year. So very exciting outlook. Thank you for everything. Horns up. Have a good night. Thank you too as well. Thank you for all the comments. You definitely were a big contributor in the comments tonight. Thank you all for watching this. Again, thank you for your patience for waiting for this post-game kind of reaction and things. I love to put in a lot of editing and effort into my videos to cut them down and make them look nice for you guys. But ran out of time for that. It's definitely hard to do that for back-to-back videos because I'll be making my preview video for the Titans very soon, actually. So thank you for bearing with me and waiting for me to give my thoughts on a live stream. And I thank you for all your comments that you guys left. You guys are so nice. Thank you so much for supporting the channel the ways that you do. I'll be seeing you later this week to preview the Titans. But as for me, horns up and God bless.